Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast. So now we get to look at some of the better Asian horror films from 2003, in my opinion. But before we get to those, we have a few honorable mentions. And remember, these are movies that some people will classify as horror, but I do not. One of the ones that I enjoyed was a film called Karaoke Terror, a fun one from Japan. I think in Japan they pronounce it karaoke, but if you pronounce it karaoke, nobody will kill you. That was a good one. Pretty fun. Another one that I enjoyed was Doppelganger, another Japanese film. That one on the DVD cover art is marketed, I think, as a horror film, but it really isn't. It's kind of a drama, romantic comedy hybrid of all things. And it was pretty good. And then we have The Legend of Evil Lake from South Korea, which is quite good as well. So I would recommend those. One that I would not recommend is a Hong Kong film called The Death Curse, which is more of a comedy, and not a very good one at that. So let's get on to our Asian horror reviews, shall we, from 2003, the good ones. And as always, titles for all of the movies I discuss are listed in the description box below. So the first film we're covering tonight is a film called Tales of Terror from Tokyo. I've also seen this listed as Tales of Terror from Tokyo and All Over Japan, a Japanese horror anthology. Now, here's the DVD description for you. Excuse me. It's a catchy one. While some stories may seem too fantastic to believe, many come from the most horrifying of sources, the truth. Step into places not meant for the living. Witness psychological horrors that rattle the nerves, all brought to spine-tingling life by Japan's up-and-coming masters of horror, including Takashi Shimizu and Norio Sorata. Can your fragile psyche withstand these twisted tales of terror? I kind of liked when I read the DVD description, because I own this one. I was kind of smiling when I read that, so I figured I'd include it. Now, this is an anthology of 64 horror short films that are 5 minutes long each. This is spread out over a 4-disc DVD set. So, of course, Takashi Shimizu was a man who gave us the Ji-woon franchise, and Norio Sorata gave us Ringu Zero, as well as a few other films. Now, these two directors did not direct all of the short films in this anthology, but they directed some of them, so that's a positive. Now, a time restriction of 5 minutes per story sounds like a pretty bad idea, doesn't it? Because of the obvious limitations to character and storyline development. If you start and end in 5 minutes, there's not a whole lot of story or character development you can include in that short allotment of time. But these little stories do provide a unique structure that is interesting to watch. If you can imagine sitting by a campfire and you listen to someone recalling a plethora of short urban legends, that gives you kind of an idea of what this anthology has to offer. Now, the big positives for me are the de-emphasis on jump scares. They're almost non-existent, actually, from what I remember. There's a prominence on creepiness, which is good. The atmospheric lighting is nice, and the variety of themes and supernatural ideas helps to mix things up. Now, a lot of these shorts do focus on ghost and haunting segments, but they do, as I said, mix it up a little bit. There's some different types of hauntings here. And the traditional Onryo ghost only shows up a small handful of times. So if you're sick of the Onryo ghost, you only have to see her a few times in this. Now, the acting in these are hit or miss. Obviously, you have a lot of different actors. You're dealing with, let's see, how many short films are we talking here? It was 64. So you're talking about a lot of different actors here. So some of them are pretty good, some of them not so much. So that's hit or miss. It does get a little bit cheesy in spots, but I think this is spooky fun for the most part. It's a pretty good anthology. There is also a related movie that we will get to when we reach 2004. So I guess they initially did these short films, which were, I think, made for television. And then they progressed to a theatrical type of film with the same kind of format. So I would recommend this. DVD availability for Tales of Terror from Tokyo is that it is widely available. So feel free to pick it up on DVD if you're interested. And let's move on here to South Korea. and that is Acacia, also known as Root of Evil. Now, after 10 years of marriage, a couple live a seemingly happy and secure life together. Unable to conceive, they decide to adopt a young boy. Quiet and introverted, he spends most of his time playing underneath the acacia tree in their backyard, but strange occurrences begin to manifest. So this atmospheric film focuses primarily on the dramatic conflicts between the main characters, and that's a good thing. That's one of its strengths. This isn't a generic creepy kid movie either, because that's the first thing you think of. Oh, they adopt a kid and strange stuff happens. He must be a creepy little kid again. But it really isn't as generic as that, because one can understand the times when he does become disturbed, and I kind of like that. Camera work is fluid, and the performances are good overall. It does move slowly, but the viewer must be patient with this one and pay close attention to the little details. There's some little details here that add some value if you're paying enough attention. Now, I have seen some online viewers and reviewers just absolutely love this movie. This has a very strong fan base, and some of the fans will place this one up in the upper echelon of Asian horror films. They place it on a pedestal with some of the best of its kind, especially from this time period. But I personally do not think that it is quite that spectacular, but it is worth viewing for sure. I like this one. Now, I did mention that its alternate title is Root of Evil. Some DVD distributor thought it was a good idea to re-release this movie a few years ago under a completely different name. Maybe they were double dipping. They were hoping you would double dip on it and be like, ooh, an Asian movie called Root of Evil? I'll just blind buy it, and it's the same film as Acacia. So just be wary of that. I would focus on buying the original DVD release, because I don't know if there was any changes to this Root of Evil version. But just a heads up for you on that one. And DVD availability of this one is that it is widely available. Alright, so the next one here is a little bit different, and it's from Thailand. It is called Rahtree, Flower of the Night, also known as Buppah Rahtree. It is a Thai horror comedy. Now, in this film, a girl dies and then haunts the residents at an apartment complex, forcing the landlady to hire a multitude of exorcists who fail quite miserably. Now, despite the formulaic setup here, this story is quite different from many ghost movies because the middle hour is devoted mostly to comedic set pieces and is bookended by portions of dramatic horror. So this definitely shifts tone, and sometimes in Thai horror films that does not work too well, but in this case I think it does. There are some mediocre scenes here and there, but for the most part the humor is effective enough to maintain interest, especially during that core middle section. Slower pacing here helps to avoid a descent into over silliness that is prevalent in some Thai comedies. Now, this attempts to be quirky, and I think it works. Horror elements they're kind of a mix here. Some moments are good. There are some jump scares in this one, which I would have preferred if they went a different route personally, but many of those jump scares are actually used to provoke laughter, so I kind of give them a pass a little bit on this one, because it does work. I did get some giggles out of those moments, and they occur as part of the joke, so it feels natural. The ghost actually is a tough wench, too. This one works, I like it. Rahtree, Flower of the Night. Now, DVD availability of this one is that it is moderately available on Region 3 DVD with English subtitles. There are also some VCDs floating around out there. Now, if you're not unfamiliar with VCDs, those are old school. I'm amazed they still produce them, to be honest with you. They're basically like a DVD, but they don't hold as much data as a DVD does, so there's usually two of them. So when you buy a VCD, it usually comes in two discs, and the first disc will have the first half of the movie, the second disc will have the second half. I only have a few of those for films that I had trouble finding DVDs on, but they're not terrible. So if you're really interested in this movie and you can't find the DVD for some reason, you could pick up a VCD and see what that's all about. Alright. The next one here is a pretty popular film. It's the third entry in a popular horror series, and it's a good one. And that is Whispering Corridors 3, Wishing Stairs, from South Korea. Now, a staircase leading to the dormitory of a remote boarding school usually has 28 stairs, but every so often there appears to be 29. And when someone steps on the mysterious extra stair, the horror begins. So, although this is the third film in this impressive film franchise, it unquestionably includes more horror elements than the second installment did. Remember, the second installment, Memento Mori, had a very strong dramatic element to it. Wishing Stairs starts off kind of with a dramatic element, and then it just really picks up the horror. There's a lot of horror peppered in this bad boy. The entire second half is just loaded with scare tactics, most of which are effective, I think. There's also some atmosphere here in the form of the surrounding plant life. The surrounding trees look very dead, with many brown leaves littering the grounds and flying through the air. I liked that. It was a nice little touch. The storyline focuses on jealousy a lot, and is moderately successful there, as it sufficiently develops the conflicts between the characters. One thing that annoyed me, though, early on, is the girl with brown hair. There's this girl with brown hair who just overacts during the first half of the film. I didn't like her performance too much. She was mugging it, so to speak, a little bit too much. She was overdoing it. But her performance levels out and improves during the second half. So you don't have to, you don't have to put up with that flaw for the entire film. So that's important. The lead actress here is a woman by the name of Ji-woon, who was recently seen in some popular television series like Emergency Couple and The Ex-Girlfriend Club. I really like her, so it was nice seeing this early, role for her. Obviously, I saw this movie years ago before I became a fan of this actress, so going back and rewatching it recently was kind of interesting now that I know who she is, What else do we got here? Oh, compared to the prior Whispering Corridors films, Wishing Stairs also feels more like a mainstream commercial movie in terms of its style. So, for example, it borrows the Japanese Onryo ghost for its ghost design, and therefore it loses a little bit of that art house flair that drove the previous entries, and even some of the subsequent entries as well. So, you lose a little bit of that here, but that helps to make these movies distinguishable. The first film, the second film, the third film, they're all very distinguishable from one another, so it's kind of a good thing. You know what I mean? It mixes it up a little bit. I did find the ending to this one to be creepy and uncomfortable. Some people find Wishing Stairs to be the scariest of the entire franchise, and I can kind of see why. There's a lot of horror content in this, and it's good. Now, the DVD availability, expectedly, is that it is widely available, and I think, it's included in a box set with some of the other films in the franchise, so you look out for that. Alright, we have another popular one here. Another good one. But we move back to Japan now with One Missed Call, Japanese horror film. So, the DVD plot synopsis is as follows. When a group of teens start receiving a one missed call display on their cell phone screens, they hear terrifying voice messages documenting their very own anguished death throes. The idea of receiving a voice message from yourself as you die is certainly a creepy premise. Of course, we just covered an Asian horror film from 2002 that showcased phone use as a horror element, and that was Phone from South Korea. Now, I think Phone is a stronger film overall, but One Missed Call is certainly entertaining. I do think that it has a somewhat derivative opening, however, and the premise is very commonplace here, especially if you consider some of the Asian horror films that use technology in general as a theme of horror. But this film does get better and more entertaining as it goes along. The second half is really jam-packed with horror sequences, kind of like Wishing Stairs, and has a few crazy death scenes as well. The best of which is what I refer to as the bottle cap decapitation scene, which is very memorable. Not only for the death itself, but also where the death occurs. That was kind of the moment where this film really grabbed me and won me over, was that scene. It's a very good scene. Now, the lead actress here is Shibazaki, who played the psycho chick in the film Battle Royale, and she has had a long, steady career up to the present day. I like her a lot as well. So again, we have a strong lead actress here who's very likable. The director is Takashi Miike, who, of course, previously gave us Audition and Gozu, unfortunately. But years ago, I remember, after I had seen this movie back in the day, I read online that some reviewers were complaining that One Missed Call marked Miike's first sellout film to a commercialistic mainstream filmmaking style. But if you're familiar with his filmography, and you will be next year when I go through it all, you will remember that he had already made films like Andromeda back in 1998. So that argument really doesn't hold a whole lot of weight. Regardless, though, some of Miike's fans back then defended this film, One Missed Call, by claiming that it is actually a satire on mainstream Japanese horror films. But I'm not seeing that side of the argument either. I don't know if maybe Miike said that in an interview at some point that I missed, but when I watched the film, I don't really see this as a satire. I really think Miike just tried to make a mainstream horror film with a premise that's somewhat commonplace, and I think he mostly succeeded. I mean, the film plays it straight, and in my opinion, it's simply an entertaining film with some familiar elements. That's how I see this one. But I'd be interested in hearing your opinion on these thoughts. Some people think it's a little bit satirical, so I don't know. Now, the DVD availability of this one, One Missed Call, which of course I recommend, is that it is widely available, and it also comes in a box set with some of the previous films in this franchise. So again, as I always say, if there's a box set available and you're new to Asian horror and some of these titles really interest you, pick up the box set. It's cheaper than buying the films individually, usually. So now we're up here to our final 3 films. Now the next one here is one that not many people talk about anymore. It came out, it was released on Region 1 DVD in the US, but this one kind of slipped through the cracks, and I think it's solid. And that is The Uninvited, a South Korean horror drama hybrid. Now, a man and woman attempt to come to terms with their tragic pasts. A young interior designer whose recurrent hallucinations of murdered children threaten his work, his engagement, and his sanity. Now, this gloomy fellow befriends a woman so burdened by psychic visions that she teeters on the brink of madness. So these two are not in good shape mentally. The pacing in this film is very glacial, very slow. But you got to be patient here because it is worth it. I think it's very worth it. This is a very psychological horror film at its heart. So most of the disturbance occurs within a few very short but powerful sequences. One scene involving a truck is particularly shocking. It's almost like a no-holds-barred scene that you don't really see in many movies. Very memorable scene. There are also some interesting, insightful statements made about religion in this, which were kind of surprising. There's like a parable or a short story that a woman tells, I think it was in her car, with another man, and it was kind of a very insightful little story. So I liked that. There was some thought put into the religious aspect to this film. Many of these films' ideas, though, are executed with a slight ambiguity, so it allows the viewer to apply their own interpretations to some scenes as well, which I liked. So if nothing else, this is a film that avoids genre cliches. Okay, we just finished, One Missed Call, which, has some cliched elements in there. The Uninvited avoids a lot of cliches. The opening 30 or so minutes kind of make it seem like a ghost film, but it really isn't. It's not. There's a great emphasis here on human suffering, actually, and that stays with the viewer after they're finished watching this. In fact, this is one of the most effectively depressing horror films that I've seen in recent memory, at least in the past, 15, 20 years. Now, the lead actress here, I always focus on the lead actress, don't I, is Ji-woon, who is most well known for her performance in the romantic comedy My Sassy Girl. Now, most surprisingly, she gives a convincingly gloomy performance in The Uninvited. That is actually one of her career highlights, I think. She's very good in this. I was surprised because I saw this film not long after seeing My Sassy Girl for the first time, and the total change in her characters, her roles, was impressive to me. She really, she has a lot of range as an actress. So The Uninvited continues to grow on me with every viewing. And I think it's one of the gems of 2003. When I first watched this film, I thought it was just kind of okay. Then I watched it again a few years later. I was like, wow, that's actually a good movie. And then I watched it a third time years after that. I'm like, man, this is really solid. So it's one of those ones that'll grow on you. Got to give it a chance, though. So DVD availability on The Uninvited is that it is widely available. And no, it is in no way linked to the American film that was released later in the 2000s. I think 2009 or so. There was an American film called The Uninvited that is a remake of a South Korean film that is not related to The Uninvited, the South Korean film. It's related to my #1 film of this year, if you haven't guessed already. But we're down to the last 2 films now. We're down to the last 2. And this next one is a darn good flick. And if it wasn't for my #1 film of this year, which is so spectacular, this might have taken my top spot. Probably would have. And that is Ji-woon, The Grudge 2, Japanese horror film. Now, this is the second theatrical film of the Ji-woon franchise, and Takashi Shimizu returns again to direct. Now, the story is the same, focusing on the cursed house where a brutal murder previously occurred. The overall theme is also the same as the previous installments of this franchise, in that a curse is born when someone dies with a deep and powerful rage. However, I must say this. Of all the films in the Ji-woon and the Ring-U franchises, this one is the most purely entertaining due to its thoughtful screenplay. This might be a minority, in fact I know this is a minority opinion, but it's almost like the filmmakers took everything that made Ji-woon The Curse and Ji-woon The Grudge so good, and then they infused a huge dose of creativity and cleverness to everything. For example, okay, the manipulation of time in this movie is outstanding. I love it. In fact, there's an entire story segment, that is dedicated to the manipulation of time, in addition to all the other references to it, and it proves to be quite wild and disorienting. I really enjoyed that segment. There are also many interconnecting events and foreshadowing devices that are used to great effect. This movie has some of my favorite horror sequences in recent memory. In fact, I would say that the wall knocking segment is one of my favorite horror sequences of all time. That entire sequence of events is just phenomenal. I love it. When it finally reached its conclusion, I was like, wow, that was really cool. I really like that one. Spectacular stuff. Really good stuff. There are a bunch of other great moments too, which I won't spoil in case you haven't seen this one, but a few of them are actually surprisingly macabre and terrifying. I mean, you go from like creepy stuff, there's a little bit of spooky stuff involving a wig, and then you got like a macabre and terrifying finale. This movie, it's got it all, man. This film hits, I think it hits, on all cylinders, and it has a deep layer of dread to it and a number of very memorable sequences. So, like I said, in terms of the Ji-woon and Ring-U franchises, this bad boy is my favorite. And I just rewatched it. I rewatched Ji-woon The Grudge and Ji-woon The Grudge 2, and my opinion has not changed at all. I think this film is an entire level above the first Ji-woon The Grudge film. So that's not a popular opinion, but man, I am convinced in my opinion on this one. So, now what about DVD availability? Well, as expected, it's widely available. So, if you have not seen this movie, obviously, if you have not seen any of the Ji-woon films, you have to watch them all. You really do. Very good franchise, and actually a pretty reliable one, in my opinion. Alright, so we've reached the best Asian horror film of 2003. And it's my favorite movie of all time, as I mentioned in the previous video, from any genre or any country. You gotta know what it is by now. and that is A Tale of Two Sisters from South Korea. So let's just start with the DVD synopsis and go from there. Because sometimes these DVD synopses are very catchy and entertaining. So, something strange is happening when two sisters come home to their father's large but dark and somewhat foreboding house after a stay in the hospital. Their dad is cold and burdened, and their stepmother greets them with forced enthusiasm and more than a little sense of irritation. But that's nothing compared to what happens when bedtime rolls around, because ghosts lurk the premises. So, this film draws from horror, drama, and mystery genres of film. And director Ji-woon showcases a very intricate storyline here that engages the viewer to reinterpret the movie after the introduction of plot twists. So it's really essential to watch this film multiple times because you are not going to catch everything after just one viewing. This storyline really has to be one of the most tightly constructed in the history of cinema, because something vitally important happens basically every other minute throughout the film, even though that's not readily apparent upon your first viewing. So, quite literally, the director almost seems to have made a movie here that practically taunts the viewer to dissect it on the most detailed of levels. For example, like a seemingly insignificant object might be shown. There's a rack of dresses over there, some diaries, a drop of blood emanating from a floor crack, a bottle of pills, etc. But upon meticulous inspection, it turns out to be so much more. That little clue that helps to make sense of that particular scene or perhaps the movie in total. So it always contributes like a stirring reflection on the viewer's part on the psychological concepts of this film. And they kind of lurk in the background for a while, but if you're sharp enough and you catch everything, those concepts kind of spring to the forefront of your mind as you're watching the film. This is very, very detailed movie making here, people. Now, such an event like that where you have like something really subtle that really sticks it and is really important upon a repeat viewing, a scene like that might only happen once or twice in any other movie. But in A Tale of Two Sisters, those events occur in such a rapid-fire, relentless fashion that the viewer really has to watch the film in a state of alertness. You have to be alert to everything that's happening here, or else you're going to miss stuff that's very important. So the content level here is enough to fill like a dozen other films, because it's so content-packed. And that's one thing that makes this movie so special. And if that weren't impressive enough, this film boasts outstanding performances by everyone involved. After I saw this movie for the first time, I instantly became a fan of all four lead actors, so everyone really nails their role in this. Scoring is top-notch from start to finish, with some excellent music. I actually purchased the official soundtrack years ago, and I still have it in my CD collection. It's very good stuff. And one other thing I actually noticed that I'd like to say here, while I was watching the DVD special features, is that the post-production process of this film is flawless. You see basically a dozen or so scenes that were deleted from the final cut of the film so that the film can carefully and slowly reveal its secrets. So if you watch that special feature, you will see and appreciate the process of editing, because all the scenes that they discarded were either superfluous and didn't really add much, or they would have spoiled a twist that was to come later on. So this is about as close to a perfect movie as I can think of. And finally, there's a beautifully artistic, creepy atmosphere that is a joy to watch. And some of the horror sequences are memorable. So, this, in my opinion, is a true masterpiece, and I don't really use that term often. Actually, I remember when I saw this film for the first time, it was in the afternoon on a Saturday. After the movie ended, actually, throughout the first half of the film, I actually said aloud to my television screen, is anyone going to explain what's going on here? There's a little bit of frustration and confusion there. But then, bam, the second half of the film hit, and I was just like, I finished the movie, and I played it again, like immediately. So, you know, that doesn't happen too often with me. So DVD availability of A Tale of Two Sisters, which I highly, highly recommend, of course, is that it is widely available. And it's actually one of the best DVD releases. I think they still have the 2-disc DVD that was released by Tartan Asia Extreme. It's got a ton of special features, commentary, all kinds of stuff. It was a great release. So the release is fitting and worthy of the film itself. So that's 2003 in Asian horror. And be sure to join me in my next video as we will begin to explore 2004. And I'm going to tell you right now, a ton of Asian horror films were released in 2004. The production went through the roof. So, you know, many of which are interesting and are worth the watch. So get excited for that year. And it's going to take us more than 2 videos to get through 2004. I'm telling you that right now. So we got a lot more horror movies to cover. Don't think because we're through 2003 that we only got a few videos left. We got a lot of videos left. So look out for that stuff. And as always, we'll see you next time.